Hello, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the documentary for the Lane Bryant murders, the Tinley Park Five. The documentary is called Who Killed These Women, the Tinley Park Five, and the documentary was done by Charlie Min, and it's now available on several different streaming services like Amazon, Cineverse, Comcast, Roku, Sling TV, YouTube TV. I was able to watch it on my Roku through Cineverse, and it was a good documentary. The reenactment at the beginning of the documentary is very dramatic and intense, and of course sad. But Charlie Min used to work for America's Most Wanted, so the reenactment reminds me kind of the like America's Most Wanted reenactments, or the reenactments that the TV show Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack used to do. But it was a very good reenactment. It was done with the limited information that is available on this case because the police haven't put out a lot of information about this case, even though this case is 18 years old now. And so the reenactment is based on what the news media and has reported, what's out there in the public about this case. And most of, or all of what comes from what happened inside the store that day comes from the surviving victim and the 911 cell phone call. So a reenactment was done. And like I said, it's very dramatic and intense and sad. Um, but I encourage anybody and everybody to watch it and to share this documentary, to get word out that there is a documentary about this unsolved crime, because this crime is 18 years old and still hasn't been solved. And the Tinley Park Police would not participate in this documentary, and they won't release any other information regarding this case because it is an unsolved case. But a lot of people, like Charlie Min, who made this documentary, and others, believe that the police should go ahead and release some more information because they don't think it would hurt the case, to just give the public something more to go on. In this documentary, Charlie Min was able to do interviews with paramedics from the scene that day, um, co-workers who used to work at Lane Bryant, and co-workers who actually knew the store manager who was killed that day, and the part-time Lane Bryant worker who survived the shooting. And they were able to interview some family members, mainly the family members from two of the victims, the store manager who died that day, and a family member, the brother of one of the victims. He was interviewed. So it's really only, I think, two families participated in this documentary. And I understand it's, been 18 years, and it's probably a very painful thing for them, and they didn't want to participate. But I think it would have been better for the documentary if more family members had participated, and if somebody would have been a spokesperson for the Tinley Park Police. Since Charlie Min wasn't able to get Tinley Park Police to participate in the documentary, he did get police officers who aren't involved in this specific case to answer some questions, and give their perspective and talk about it from, a police officer's point of view. Like, one of the police officers he interviewed was a retired Chicago police officer. That police officer didn't have anything to do with this case, but he could, give some opinions and perspective about the case just from his work experience. They also, in this documentary, Charlie Min was able to interview a woman who worked at the Sally Beauty Supply store next door, who was there the day that this happened at Lane Bryant, and she heard some noises and stuff. And so she tells what happened that day and how the police came into her store and told her that there was a bloodbath next door. So it's a good documentary. I just wish other people would have participated, like the Tinley Park Police, um, and some more family members of other victims. And the excuse that the Tinley Park, Illinois police gives for not participating in this documentary is that when they did the America's Most Wanted segment not long after the crime happened, when this crime was newer, years ago, they did participate in a America's Most Wanted with John Walsh uh, segment regarding this case. And the Tinley Park police gave the excuse that they didn't want to participate in this documentary, even though it's been 18 years, because they said when they participated in America's Most Wanted, they got all kinds of unuseful tips that tied up their officers or investigators. It took too much time for them, and it, like took time away from things that could have been more productive for the case or whatever. And I think that's just a ridiculous reason why not participate in this documentary today, all these years later. Because one, Charlie Minn's going to make it anyway, which he did, even if they did not participate. And two, it's been 18 years. So this is a cold case, any way you look at it. They can say whatever they want, oh, it's still being investigated, blah, 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 but it's a cold case. It's been 18 years. The perp in this case could either be dead, in prison for something else, or just living his life there in the same state or nearby state. Um, so I wish the Tinley Park Police would participate. It since it's been so long, there's no reason, and they don't have to. The information that they decided, to give out during the documentary, was their choice. They didn't have to say any more or any less than they've already said, which is basically nothing. Um, so like they could just participated and just say, well, we're working on this case. We're working very hard. We feel for the victims and the victims' families, but we will not be releasing any information. They just could have went on camera and said something like that, but they chose not to participate at all and gave some stupid reason that it's because when they participated with America's Most Wanted years and years ago, that they got too many unuseful tips and stuff like that. It's been 18 years. Sure, there are, uh, crazy people who call in tips just because they want to participate or they want to be helpful. Just, random people who don't know anything will call in and give bogus tips or whatever for whatever reasons. But, they could have gotten some really good tips or some more useful information. And maybe, and convince somebody about, how the victims and how they suffered and how their families suffered and are still suffering. And, maybe somebody who knew the perp was married to him, dated him, his girlfriend in the past, his girlfriend now, um, would have decided to come forward or something. So, I just don't think more information hurts in any of these old, cold cases from years and years ago. But Tinley Park has their reasons. I just hope the reasons that they give are valid and they're not refusing to speak because they think or they know that they messed up this case in the beginning, so they don't want to give out any information because they're afraid it will make them look bad or something. This isn't, the Lane Bryant murder case isn't a current case like the Nancy Guthrie case. There is really no reason for them not to give out more information. I know they want to always hold information back that only the perp would know and stuff, but they should give a little more. And also, the surviving victim, the only surviving victim and witness in this case, did not participate in this documentary. I don't even know if Charlie Minn has ever spoken to her, contacted her. I know he's tried to find her, but I don't know if he's ever actually got in touch with her or her family directly. But apparently she's still out there. I think her name is Marty. um, or Marta or Marty. I think it's Marty. And it's a first name. Her last name isn't given, and she's somewhere out there. And all the documentary says about her was that she was a nursing student at one time, at least she was when this happened, that she went to like memorial services and funerals for one or more of the victims. She was like I said earlier, she was a part-time worker, and she turned her head at just the right time, and so she just got a graze wound, and so that's how she survived. Um, and all the information that the police have of what went on, besides the 911 call, is from her. She's the only witness, and I don't know what she's doing today or how she's doing or how this. I'm sure this affected her deeply, and apparently she was, you know, the only uh, victim there that was assaulted, essayed, like touched inappropriately um, by the perp. I think she was the, if I remember correctly, she was the only one who was assaulted in that way. Of course, the women were there together in the back room, so really they all got assaulted because, if he's doing that in front of them or, even saying sexually derogatory stuff, that's verbal assault. That's, so, but apparently to my understanding, the surviving victim was the only one that got like physically essayed by the perp. And to my understanding, the SA included touching, inappropriate touching, and that thing, and not like an actual rape. So that is basically, you know, all the documentary has to offer. I did learn a couple of new facts and learned a little bit more about their surviving victim. It is a mystery. It is kind of mysterious that the surviving victim hasn't talked after all these years, at least on social media or something. But not everybody's into social media, and not everybody wants to be in front of the camera, and not everybody can talk about something so horrific. And also, fear could be playing a part in why this woman hasn't ever come forward, or is because she was a surviving victim and she could fear that the perp would come after her because she is the only witness, the only living witness to this crime. So apparently, after 18 years, the surviving victim wasn't able to give any more information to help the police solve this case. And unless they have DNA, which the documentary states that, the Charlie Min, the documentary maker, isn't even sure if they have DNA. They talk about how they should have some DNA, like touch DNA. If you hear noise in the background, my dog is having a nightmare. They have touch DNA. And okay, I'm back. I had to pause the video a second because my dog's having a bad dream and making all kinds of noise. Um, so, like I was saying, the only way that they're going to solve this is with DNA, and the documentary isn't sure that they have DNA. But the technologies has changed greatly since this crime happened in February 2008. So there's things like touch DNA and stuff. So I don't know if they have any evidence that they can reprocess to see if they can get touch DNA of the perp, because he used tape, I believe, gray tape, duct tape. Um, and I believe he touched some counters and stuff. So his fingerprints could be places, touch DNA could be places. Um, so, and one other thing I learned about the surviving victim, I believe she had gunpowder on her collar area. So I think that means she was shot up close. And so the only, like, they don't, talk about suspects and stuff. They don't want to falsely accuse anybody or be sued or anything. The surviving victim, they did go a little bit into, you know, talking about her. You get the vibe that some people think she might be involved, but then co-workers who actually knew the surviving victim said no. At least one co-worker said no, she didn't think that she could have been involved. But then one family member said that at the funeral for his sister, he wouldn't even look at her. He said God told him not to look her in the face. And I don't know if that's because he had some funny feeling about her, that she was somehow involved, or that he didn't want to upset her because she survived a horrendous thing and his sister and the other victims were all murdered. I don't know exactly what was he meant by that, but I appreciate the family members who did participate in the documentary, and I wish more people. But I understand, like husbands who lost their wives years ago, they moved on, I guess. Um, some of them would have adult children now, and I don't know if they couldn't be found or they didn't want to participate in the documentary. But so anyway, the Tinley Part 5 Who Killed These Women documentary is now available on Amazon, OTT, Cineverse, Comcast, Roku, Newman, Sling TV, and YouTube TV. And I found it on Roku, Cineverse. So I don't know, but I found it for free. Some of these others, you may have to pay a fee. Um, I have Roku TV, and it said it was available on Cineverse. I could watch it for free, so I just downloaded the Cineverse app and got to watch it for free. Roku TV is free, and then Cineverse was free for me on Roku, and so I got to watch it for free. But some others, they may ask you for a fee. I'm not sure. Like YouTube TV, you might have to have their monthly subscription, or maybe get like a free trial, like 7-day subscription, and watch it and then just cancel it or something like that. I don't know how these things work. I think Comcast is just regular cable where you can stream it. I don't have regular cable anymore. I just have the internet streaming. And I don't know what Roku Newman means. I have Roku, but I don't know what Newman means. But anyway, so these are some places where this documentary can be watched. And like, for example, here's the Amazon Docurama, and it says you can get a 7-day free trial to watch this. So I guess here you can't watch it free, but you can get a 7-day free trial on Amazon. Or if you have Amazon Prime, you might be able to get it for free. So it's called Who Killed These Women? The Tinley Part 5. And also, this map right here shows Interstate 80, the interstate that goes by the shopping center where this crime was committed. And as you can see, it goes all the way from California to New Jersey. One person who when I was researching this case for a previous video I made, one person said that he thought that he gave like a profile of the perp, and he said that the person probably or might have lived in Gary, Indiana, and Gary, Indiana is very near to the Lake Park, excuse me, Tinley Park community where this happened, and he thought maybe the perp came from Gary, Indiana. And some people think it's a truck driver. So if it's a truck driver and he just happened to choose this area and got off the interstate or whatever and parked his, let's say he had a big rig like behind the store or something, or he was making a real delivery somewhere else in the shopping center and then decided to do this or something, as like a serial killer or something. I don't know, but you can see the interstate that runs by the shopping center goes across the US. So it literally could be anybody from anywhere. So he may not have been in the Illinois or Indiana area. He may have just, or, he didn't have to be a truck driver. He could have just drove a car across the US or, but one profile that I read said that he probably still lived in the area. And that profiler thought it was probably like Gary, Indiana area since it's close by or something like that. So who knows? But The Interstate 80 does go all across the U.S., so he could have traveled from anywhere. And of course, he didn't have to come off the interstate. It may not be a truck driver. It could just be somebody drove a car, a vehicle. And the documentary does show the only videotape evidence they have that was like at a shopping center across the street that was in that showed the parking lot in front of the Lane Bryant area. And even after all these years, I guess the technology hasn't been able to improve it to where they could get like a clear view of the vehicle, possibly who was in the vehicle, who got in or out of the vehicle, or a license plate number. And of course, it's been years ago, but I think they could go back to records and still check to see who owned what vehicle or who was registered to what license plate number and so forth. But and that might lead them somewhere to who did this. But so far, the police have released no new evidence or information about this case. But the documentary filmmaker Charlie Mann, he did a real good job. And so I hope this documentary gets out there and a lot of people watch it, and that it'll bring this case back to life.